Bonnie, and this is the Tarot Table with Bonnie and Peter, where we lay the cards on the table and talk about life, tarot, and everything in between. So shuffle your deck, pull up a chair, and join us at the Tarot Table. Welcome to the Tarot Table with Bonnie and Peter. I'm Bonnie, and today we're going to be talking about court cards. So I think court cards are probably one of the most confusing aspects of reading tarot and learning tarot. And we're going to try to help you understand them a little bit better and just know that they can be difficult for a lot of people. So if you're already having troubles understanding the concept of the court cards, we're gonna try to help you overcome that a little bit. So, but just know that it's difficult for everybody. So don't feel bad if that already seems challenging for you. So what are the court cards to begin with? So in tarot, there are the four suits. So if we're talking about the minor arcana, there are the four suits, and within each of those suits, there's four court cards. So we have the pages, the knights, the queens, and the kings. And they all represent different things. And I think that's what becomes a little bit confusing because they're very multifaceted. They can represent personality types. They can represent people in our lives. They can represent us. They can also represent like the types of energies that we need to harness for a particular situation. And we'll go into each of what the meanings of those court cards are. But I think that's what tends to become a little bit confusing because within a reading, if a court card shows up, then you have the option to look at it and say, well, what is this representing at this point? Is this me? Is this something that I need to, again, harness the energy of that card? Do I need to take action right now? Do I need to provide some type of leadership quality? Or, if it's somebody else, what is that person representing for us in our lives? Or kind of where we stand in a situation. So fear not. They can be confusing, but hopefully we'll break it down a little bit for you to make it a little bit easier to understand. What do you think, Peter? How would you talk about court cards in that context?
Exactly the same way. And I'd say the same. I'd say fear not. I might say fear a little bit, because I think sometimes that's a good thing, or at least be somewhat apprehensive because they can be challenging. I think most practitioners would tell you that maybe even next to the major arcana, that the court cards can cause some issue. And I'd always say, I think actually the major arcana is even a little bit easier because it's the concepts are really global. Whereas with the court cards, they, like you said, they can represent a variety of things. And I think that's sometimes where the challenge lies. It's like, well, is this talking about me? Is this talking about somebody else? Is this talking about a role that I need to play? Is it talking about a role somebody else needs to play? Or as you mentioned, is it talking about an energy that either needs to be brought into a situation or is part of a situation that we're in? And it's like, well, which one is this card talking about? And I think sometimes that can cause challenges when we're dealing with the court cards, because the answer to that question would be, well, it really can be any and all of those things. And it depends on the context, and it depends on your intuition. It sometimes depends on, if you're working with someone else, how that might resonate with them. I know for me, if I'm working with a client or even with myself, one of the most important questions I ask is, well, where do you see the fill in the blank court card in this situation? And that kind of helps decipher it. But that's not an uncommon question in any situation. I would say it really does apply to the court cards because of the variety of ways that a court card can exist. That it can be an actual person, it can be energetic as applied to a situation, it can be a blend of those things. So yeah, that's, the other thing I would add though is, although it normally follows that idea of page, knight, queen, king, with the variety of decks that there are out there, I don't panic if you open your deck and go, oh my goodness, there's no king in here, or, there's no page in here. Make sure that you look at the resources that are provided, because one of the things that deck creators will do is change the name of, I'll say the most traditional and probably the most common um, titles that are given to each of the ranks of a court card. So, we've mentioned it before. We've actually shown decks that have elemental links to the suits, and I've shared a deck like the Guy Tarot that also has different names for um, the ranks of the suit. So, for example, the child is the page, and so forth and so on. So that's it. But as far as what they are, um, yeah, I'd have nothing to add. I'd have nothing to add. That's
Yeah, thanks for bringing up that reminder, because they're not always called pages, knights, queens, and kings. Like I'm using a deck right now, and the king is the lord, right? And I think the page is the princess, maybe. So again, like just what
yeah,
Peter said,
yeah,
look at your resource guide, and then you'll have an idea of what that particular court card is aligned with,
line.
if you're used to pages, knights,
Yeah.
queens, and kings.
Yeah. And it can sometimes as well even highlight the element of that rank that the deck creator is trying to highlight. Because again, I'll refer to, to Joanna's deck, the Guy in Tarot, where you have the child, which represents the page. Well, that word child really does have a particular meaning when we talk about page, that concept of wonder and that idea of almost innocence and naivety, which is one aspect of the page that she's personified in the child. And yet the knight is equal to the explorer, which is another aspect of knight-like energy that she's chosen to highlight by giving the knight the name explorer, and so forth and so on. And you will find that that's what happens in your decks. I actually think it can be a really interesting way to compare one deck to the other if they use a different name for the rank. So
I love that. So the explorer is the knight in the Guy
yeah,
in Tarot?
it is. So the guy, just to give you, since I brought it up, so with the Guy in Tarot, it's actually child, explorer, guardian, elder. So you
Oh,
can see right away using those four titles what the creator of the deck, so what Joanna is trying to do with that deck and what she's trying to highlight. Like, I love the idea of guardian for the queen. Like, to me,
mhm.
because I've always talked about, we'll get into that in a minute, but the queen for me is that inward facing leadership, that idea of the supporting role, still somebody who is very strong and knowledgeable in their realm, but is somebody who isn't necessarily forward facing. Whereas an elder, is somebody who disseminates knowledge, who we go and seek for guidance, who really does lead. And that kind of sits in that king energy. So we've already started talking about the different
Mhm.
roles. So I wonder if we should do
Should
it.
we go right
Yeah,
into it?
should we jump into it? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And Peter and I have a little surprise too. So what we've done is we've tried to come up with some, uh, I guess, celebrities, but the role that they're playing in either a movie or a TV show, or maybe the celebrity in general, like their
Yeah.
actual personality.
Yep.
So we're going to try to tie some of those into these different examples of the different court cards that we're going to talk about today. So maybe you'll agree with us, maybe you won't, but we hope it'll be entertaining
We
anyway.
hope so. And if you don't, if you have other examples or ideas, please put them in the comment section. So, one of the interesting things about working with the court cards is to try and associate elements, whether it's a fictional character, a literary character, whether it's a larger than life character, whether it's a real person, to try and attribute that to one of the 16 court cards can be a really good learning tool for you as you decipher this section of the tarot. So, yeah, join us in this exercise. This is not the end all and be all. Bonnie and I, are certainly not, not presenting ourselves as the ultimate knowledge keepers of the tarot. So it's certainly not. You're welcome to disagree with where we attribute the courts, but this is kind of us sharing our opinion. So do you want to
Exactly.
start?
Sure. So we'll start with the pages. And I've mentioned this before, but when I think about pages, I sort of relate that to the ace in that suit.
Yeah.
So pages for me represent a new beginning, something that hasn't really started yet, but it could be a message about something coming or an opportunity. They also represent that youthful energy, that curiosity. So it's about wanting to do something and not really having sort of fear around going after what it is that you want to do. They're curious, they're adventurous, they do things, they have this youthful, playful energy. So it's very innocent and young.
Mhm.
So if we're looking at that as a person, that could be someone in your life that it doesn't have to represent them necessarily in the age of a page, but the energy around that page. So, sometimes someone could be 70 years old, but they're like a page because they're fun and they're playful and everything in life is, that fun opportunity, something to go after. So I see pages as that. They're representing new beginnings. And yeah, often when I see pages for myself, it's a reminder for me to have some more fun and don't be so serious. Yeah, and also a lot of times about learning. So pages often come up for students when they're, off to university or starting something new, or if it's something new in your beginning of learning, like you want to take a course or something, then usually if a page shows up, it's about a message about continuing on with that. What do you think, Peter?
Yeah, I would agree. Interesting you talked about the idea of pages being linked to the ace cards, being akin to the ace cards, because a lot of esoteric societies would actually put them side by side.
Mm,
I often think when I think page, I sometimes also think of the fool. I think of that
mm,
energy, that potential energy, the idea that I have a journey that I haven't quite started yet. I think the fool is much less defined than that. It's a much broader journey. The page, we sometimes get a hint as to where that might be when we
mm.
take a look at the suit. You
Yes.
talked about the idea of a page often being a student. And I think, of course, they're starting a journey of learning. And then I think of, well, the Page of Pentacles would be that could be a real practical um, hands-on approach to learning, whereas a Page of Swords might be starting a journey that's more head-based, that's more word-oriented, that's more ideas-oriented. But yeah, I love that idea of, I think it might have been Liz Worth who actually used the language of unformed to
Mhm.
define the energy of the page. And I love that. So, I'm going to borrow it, giving credit where credit is due. And if I gave credit to the wrong practitioner, my apologies. But that word unformed, I really do like that to talk about the page.
Yeah, like there's potential there,
Yeah,
right?
correct. Yeah, but there's a beginning. So when we think about page from a youthful perspective, from an age perspective, it doesn't have to be age based, as you said. You can have a 70-year-old person exhibiting that level of beginning energy, that idea
Mhm.
of potential, that concept of youthfulness, that naivety or innocence that sometimes sits inside that area. That sense of wonder as well is
Mhm.
often associated with the page. So yeah,
So
that's
do you have an example of of a
I have
character
an example because we had talked a
that
little bit about this just to make sure that we weren't providing, either the same examples. And the very first example is literally one when we had talked about where we came up with the exact same character. So what I've tried to do with each of these is I've looked at what I hope are relatively common um, either I went with fictional characters for the most part, not in every case, but for the most part. I tried to go with characters that were relatively well known. So if you don't know them, my apologies. Obviously, Bonnie and I are also bringing our own personal experience to the table, but this is where we certainly hope that as you are watching and or listening, that you'll share your experience with these particular cards. So yeah, for me, the Page of Swords, Hermione Granger in the Harry Potter book or movie series. So this is a student, right? You talked about the idea of somebody studying, and the whole premise of this series takes place in a school, that it is all around the Hogwarts School of Wizardry. And Hermione Granger is a student of words. She is the spellcaster extraordinaire in this series. At times she's actually lethal with her words. So her words literally manifest all kinds of things. So words are very much a swords based area. She's very sharp with her wit. So there are times when, Ronald Weasley, who is a very close friend of hers in the series, will, what they'll have some kind of repartee, and she literally cuts him down with her words so that his response is, he just doesn't know what to say. So she's very, very sharp witted. And then she also has that, she's got that kind of, I won't say naivety, but she really does have that level of actually curiosity and wonder that would exist inside a page. So she's always wanting to find new ways to do something. She'd be the first person to go into the forbidden library to try and find out a new way, a new spell. So yeah, that's kind of where I sort of put, I took my example of Paige with the Page of Swords, and used Hermione Granger in that example. How about you?
Yeah, so I also picked her. So I won't
Yeah.
repeat what you said because I
No,
completely agree with
and
you.
upon like, just so people know, after reviewing, it was the only one where we came up with something in character. Although I think we agreed with everything that we each offered. This was one where we literally like, oh my goodness, that's exactly the example that that I also came up with. So
Yeah. Yeah, super smart and curious and not afraid to go after what she wants. So really harnessing that swords energy. I so I was sort of talking about this with my family and I'm like, oh, I gotta think about, some celebrities, the roles that they play. So they actually came up with a page of wands for me, and that is Moana,
oh
like
wow, okay.
the Disney
Yeah.
character. So she's like fiery and charismatic. And she, I guess there was a part in the movie that they told her, you can't go past the water. And she was like, I'm going past the water. So she exemplifies this like fiery, I'm going to go after it, spontaneous, and I'm going to do it. And I'm not really afraid of what I'm going to find on the other side of that. So, Page of Wands, Moana, that's my, other than the Page of Swords, which we 100% came up with the same person.
Well, and you really highlighted, because we talked about two different suits. We talked about the swords and the wands, and we'll actually make sure that we give examples in all the suits. But I think it's always interesting as to how the same rank, and I use the language rank to define page, knight, queen, king, versus the idea of suits, which is wands, cups, swords, and pentacles. We had the same rank. We had page coming from two different places. And, we had the idea of swords with Hermione Granger being that sharp wit, sharp tongue, intellectual, word focused. Whereas you talked about Moana and wands, which is all about fire, all about drive, all about determination, all about ambition. And that is despite, but still having that wonder, that creativity, that youthfulness that exists inside the page. So that's one thing I want to make sure people understand, that the court cards, one of the, I think the almost magical things about the court cards is they really do blend to, I'll use the word elements because they can link to elements, but even to characteristics, that it's the rank mixed with the suit. And as they get together, they really can create quite an interesting blend of those two things. So keep that in mind as you're trying to define what they look like.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
Moana. Yeah, I love that. I love that.
It was so cute. I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
yes, that was
Yeah, for sure. For
perfect.
sure.
So you can play this game with your kids and get them to help you come up
I,
with people.
this is a great road trip game for those of you that,
Well,
are
we were
heading
in the
on, right? There
car.
you go. Family
Yeah,
activities.
absolutely. Okay, so do we want to move on to nights?
Sure. Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so when I think of a night, I think so the page is more of like a new beginning, a new opportunity, and the night, the energy I get from the night is now taking action. So the night is courageous. It like they go after what they want. They're very goal oriented. They can be really spontaneous, but I think the main idea or energy behind a night is really taking action. They're action based, and then again, depending on the suit, depending on that element, it kind of wavers as to, is it quick action? Is it like super spontaneous? Is it emotional, or is it very slow moving? And so that's where we get into that nuance of the knight. So they're definitely like on a quest and they're pursuing something. And I love how you gave that example of the explorer. So that would tie in so beautifully with knight energy.
Yeah.
What would you add to that?
One thing, I'd add one word, that idea that it is often a directed energy, so that
Yeah.
it is at times focused. And I always think with the knight, because there is still a level of immaturity with the knight,
Mhm.
that focus can be a good thing or it can be a bad thing, that they still don't have the discernment that a queen or a king might have, in that, that focus isn't at the expense of everything else, whereas a knight can still be like ultra focused, sometimes to their own detriment. But otherwise, you touched on everything that I would also associate with a knight. Though, then do you have a knightly example then that you would share?
Yeah, the knights were the easiest for me.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna pick my favorite so that we don't go into all of them. I think I'm gonna pick, so the Knight of Cups. I picked Jack from the Titanic. So
Ah,
to me, he embodies that Knight of Cups. So the Knight of Cups is this creative, intuitive, like loving, romantic character. And Jack from the Titanic, I think is like a perfect example of that. He was an artist. He's poetic. He loved. Oh my gosh, I can't even remember her name now from
Rose.
Titanic. Yes, thank you.
Rose.
Like he was pursuing her, but in this, way that was just
Yeah.
so loving and compassionate. So I think about the Knight of Cups as someone who wears their heart on their sleeve, and they're not afraid to be sensitive and emotional and to show that side of them. And they're just in love with life in general, and with being in love. So I really feel that he embodied that for me. And when I thought of it, I'm like, oh, he's the perfect Knight of
Yeah.
Cups. Although it didn't end well for him, but
No, no, it didn't end well. But interestingly enough, the word that I was thinking of when you talked about Knight of Cups defines how it ends. And for those who haven't seen the movie, we won't blow it. Um, but it was the word chivalrous, which is the
Mhm.
idea of putting someone else's needs. And now, it's often associated with actual knights, from medieval and pre-medieval times. But the idea of being, that gallant knight in shining armor, that archetype, for lack of a better word, that character really does sit nicely with the Knight of Cups. And there are
Mhm.
parts in the movie where, he places Rose's needs, or what he assumes Rose's needs are, ahead of his own. So that was the word that I was thinking of as well. But I love that. That's a great choice for a knight, the Knight of Cups.
Did you pick a Knight of Cups too?
I didn't know. I
Okay,
did
good.
when no, I didn't actually. I went with a Knight of Wands. So what I did in preparation for this episode is I kind of went and picked one rank and one suit, making sure that I had one from each suit and one from each rank. So for the Knight of Wands, I actually went also what I thought was pretty easy. I went with Harry Potter. Um, because I think, there's that element of adventure that kind of sits with the knight, but also sits in that fiery realm of wands. There is a daringness, but he's got some fire. So at times he's quick to temper. Like he can get, fiery. And I always think of the Knight of Wands, and it reminds me again of information that I read. I actually think it was and the name will come to me. So the name of the practitioner will come to me, but it was not my idea. It was the idea that the Knight of Wands actually in the Rider-Waite Smith actually carries a small wand. So they're not armed with a sword like the Knight of Swords is, obviously. So it means they're almost in a defensive position. So it's the kind of knight that's not looking for a fight. Now, Harry Potter was never looking for a fight, but always ready to protect himself and those that he loved. Um, so always ready. He'd be ready for a fight if one was brought to him, but didn't go out looking for one. And then the last thing is I thought, well, I put him in the Knight of Wands because he literally carries one. Like he is walking around with a wand all the time. So Knight of Wands Harry Potter was my, and I did stick with the Harry Potter. I won't say the movie. The books were probably more influential for me. My children, who are in their very late 20s, were very much influenced by the books. So that to me is kind of a character reference that that sits well. It sits well with me. So, anyways, yeah, that was where I was at. So I don't know. Anything
That's
to
great.
add to the Knight of Wands or
No, I think that's great.
good?
Do you want to talk about queens?
Yes. So the energy for a queen, and I kind of hinted at this before. To me, a queen is that experienced inward facing leadership. So we often look to queens, and the element I would associate with a queen is water. So they are nurturing and they are compassionate and they show intuition, but they are also powerful. And I think of the queens as not necessarily the power that you yield or the action that you take, but the power that you hold. So a queen is often, and I've used this language before, that inward facing leadership, that role of support. The queen is often who we go and look to for guidance, as opposed to the king, which we'll get to in a second, is where we go and look to for action. So that's kind of where I would talk about the queen. What about you? Anything that you would add to that?
Yeah, I agree. I too feel that same way about the queen. Like it's this very nurturing, compassionate, loving, kind energy. Even when, we'll talk about the Queen of Swords in a bit, but even though that sometimes can seem a little bit edgier, I guess, for
Yeah.
lack of a
Well, a
better word,
sword
with
has
the
an edge, right? A sword
Sword
has an
has an
edge.
edge. She has an edge to her. There's still that level of compassion and kindness that comes from the queen. So, if we talk about like a symbol, like that motherly, loving kind of energy, somebody you need to go to for guidance and support. And a lot of times, again, like we're talking about personality types, but if this card shows up for you in a reading, it could be about giving yourself that type of, like harnessing that own energy for you. So, these words of compassion and nurturing, where can you find that in your life? If that's a person that you want to go to, then definitely seek that support. But also, how can you nurture and be compassionate and kind and loving to yourself? So, if we're looking at it from that energetic perspective, I feel when I see the queens, it really reminds me of what is the energy that I need for me right now, or where can I find that support?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
really like loving, feminine, receptive
Correct.
energy, I guess,
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. For sure. Definitely personification of the queen. And then,
So who did you pick as your queen?
so who did I pick as my queen?
As your
So
queen, as your
I,
example
as
of
my
the
example,
queen?
so I went with the Queen of Pentacles.
Okay.
And although I went with two examples, I'll share the non HP one. I actually went with Cameron Tucker from Modern Family, and this would
I
be
love that.
like, I guess in some ways Queen of Cups, because
Mhm.
there's definitely a full out water everywhere, that Cameron often operates from the idea of emotion. But I thought the reason I went with Queen of Pentacles is because there's the queen aspect of wearing your heart on your sleeve, and I'm stealing your phrase, because I think that's what queens do. They have an element of emotion and support.
Mhm.
But the reason I went with Queen of Pentacles is because Cameron's realm is the home, and that what they really want to create is the perfect home for Mitch, and they say so, and that they want to be the perfect, almost role of mother for Lily. His work was the work of a music teacher, which again is a very, queen like job. And the concept that his persona, the queen persona, exists in that realm of water, that emotion and compassion and empathy, but also water run amok. The idea of the overflowing, boiling over idea of queen like energy also exists in Cameron Tucker. So that was my queen example. What about you?
Yeah, I love that example. I have a few different examples for queens, but I think the one that I'm going to select is Maleficent from the actual the not the animated movie, but like the what do you call that? Like the real people
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Maleficent movie, the one that Angelina Jolie played
yeah.
in Maleficent. So I would say she would be Queen of Swords energy. And the reason why I pick that is I sometimes the Queen of Swords gets a bad rap. And I think Maleficent sort of plays off of that because she's very smart, she's courageous, she's an excellent communicator. She's also a leader in how she's the one who led her the fairies in where she
Yeah.
was living. She was also compassionate and kind, but she did have this side to her that was very strong and went after what she wanted, and she created boundaries, right? Like she created an entire boundary around her kingdom, and she has this also compassionate, loving side, which we see, at the end of the movie where she falls in love with Cinderella. I don't know if they referred to her as Cinderella in the not Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty. Oh my
Sleeping
gosh,
Beauty.
I'm getting all my Disney movies
Yeah,
mixed up.
that,
So I
it's okay. I
I
was thinking it
love
was I
her.
was thinking it was Snow White, but you're right when you said Sleeping Beauty. I'm like, yeah, 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 it was Sleeping Beauty.
Yeah, Sleeping Beauty. Sorry, yes. We're getting all of our Disney movies all
You
tied in
got it.
together, but I love Snow White. But yeah, so Maleficent for the Queen of Swords, courage, but still compassionate, going after what she wants, creating boundaries, and not being afraid to be who she is. Like she stands her truth. She, you know, um, yeah,
Yeah.
I need that energy.
It's
The
actually
energy of the Queen of Swords.
it's a great aside. Like when we talk about, Disney characters, that those ideas, like things like a Disney character or a fairy tale, or, I think, the Marvel or DC comic world, everything from, so we've talked about Moana, Black Panther, Batman, Wonder Woman. They are all actually really good ways to think about the court cards in the tarot deck. So, then just to give you examples of, well, where can I go? I'm stuck with ideas as to where to go. Those could be some great examples. Mythology would be another one where you could go as well. So some of those kind of stories. So no, I think it's great. And then of course the idea of the edge, right? The idea of that edginess that a sword has, and it's a cutting edge, which would absolutely sit with the Maleficent character. So yeah,
And
good, yeah,
and
good call.
if we go deep, I mean, we could do like an entire episode on this, but if you think about it, it's about
Yeah,
truth, right? Like what was being portrayed, that she was a villain, and really she wasn't. She was coming back for what was rightfully hers. So that idea that swords can cut through illusions,
yeah.
right? They can provide clarity, but they can also be dangerous if you use them from that perspective. So um I love that play on.
Yeah, on both. And we talk about, because the Cameron Tucker was another example of that queen energy at times gone amok too. So it's remembering that, sometimes things, sometimes the energy around a court card can be supportive and positive, and sometimes it can actually be um dismantling and negative as well. So it can be both. It can contain both. You said the word around boundary, and I love that too, because a queen with that water energy is very much the provision of the container, right? The
Mhm.
the idea of being able to contain things too. So
Yeah,
yeah,
for
no, no,
sure.
yeah. All right, you want to take us to the our last stop in the in the ranks, to the
And
kings?
the kings to the
Yeah.
kings? Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so how do I see a king? I see a king as sort of being like experienced and wise. Like they've been through all of those stages and now they're in a place of being able to provide guidance, to provide leadership. Like you would come to a king for advice or help or support in whatever aspect that is. It could also be if you're looking at the energy of the king, like how can I use that leadership quality to move forward? How can I take the action that the king has taken to get to where they are? They're very smart, they're wise, they're protective, often family, like if we think about that again as like this fatherly figure, it doesn't have to be, gender specific, but um, just that energy of being protected and safe and secure and yeah, being with somebody who is wise and experienced. So I get a lot of kings that come up in my reading, which I'm like, okay, okay. But I think it's, you know, just try to
Yeah.
kind of say sometimes like, you know more than you think you know, you're wiser than you think you are, or you have the capacity to do what this king is doing, or to really take in that energy. So I when the king shows up, it's a good for me. I like seeing the kings in my readings just because they've attained where they want to be in life, and now they're able to appreciate where they are and see things from a broader perspective.
Yeah.
What do you think, Peter?
Yeah, yeah. Again, I agree. For me, I would just because I agree with you in that both the king and the queen are places that we will go for guidance,
Mhm,
and but I would differentiate because I think one is guidance. Seeking guidance from a queen can sometimes be that internal, nurturing,
mhm,
reflective guidance, where seeking guidance from a king is often action oriented.
mhm,
What am I going to do? Guidance from a queen is often how am I going to feel? And guidance
mhm,
from a king is, well, what am I going to do? How am I going to move forward? How am I going to take that fire energy from the king and do something with it? So I think of, queen, I think I'd mentioned the idea of power you have, king, idea of power that you use, but both are powerful ranks in and of themselves. So, um, and yeah, and you had mentioned, you had alluded to before that we sometimes attach, well, we often, if not always, attach the idea of gender to a king or to a queen. But part of the reason I wanted to use Cameron Tucker with the queen is I wanted to kind of breach that idea of attaching female gender to kind of a female role. And I'll do the same thing with my king example as well. So kind of move away from that. But I mean, I agree. And I also think that a king is outward facing leadership. So a king does sit in an authority space, but they sit in a visible authority space. So they assert their authority or they act with their
mhm,
authority. And a king that can also go, sideways, that a king can be assertive, but a king can also be aggressive and tyrannical as well, right?
yeah.
So if we're going to talk about outward facing power, then we can absolutely talk about the power gone amok too. So that's like, remember to hold space for for both sides, for I guess all sides of the king. So let's take a look at the king in the same way we have all the other ranks, and let's give you an example. And if you'll indulge me, I actually have two. Um, so I actually have I have one card and two examples, one fictional and one real life. I'm sure you know where I'm going to go because I've used this example multiple times.
Oh,
So
yes.
I'm going with the King of Cups. For those of you who have watched several episodes, you know full well where I'm going. I'm going to Ted Lasso because to me, Ted Lasso is the ultimate example of heart-based leadership. If you want more examples of how Ted Lasso links to the King of Cups, I'm going to urge you to go back and have a listen to some of our past episodes. The other example I'm actually going to give is Taylor Swift, because to me, there is no question that when she leads, and I think of her first and foremost here as the CEO of her organization,
Mhm,
and the sense that I get from, the public persona or perception that we get from Taylor Swift is that she leads that organization, whatever you call it, Taylor Swift Inc., from the heart. And I think of the example where I think she spent like $50 million in bonuses for her touring staff. And there was a story where she gave every truck driver, and I mean, her tour would have dozens of trucks that would be, like I'm thinking of her Eras tour traveling around North America, that she gave each driver $100,000 bonus. And one was quoted as saying, "This is life-changing money." I think that's an outward expression, king of compassion,
mhm,
cups. It's also bold, which is very fire oriented in that king space. And, for a lot of people, it was life changing as well. It was, like I said, it was very, very action oriented. But then I also think about, her public persona as an artist. And there is no question that a chunk of her song lyrics are often driven by emotion, by the realm of cups, that the realm of cups is mostly where her song lyrics live, that she talks about current relationships, past relationships. She tries to link her heart to the heart of, millions and millions of other primarily women who are listening to her music. So to me, I think she's a great personification of the King of Cups. And I also wanted to provide an example that doesn't sit inside that typical male gender that we would associate with king, that the gender of the rank is not related in any way to the gender of the role or the gender of the person that's either coming to represent that card or coming to provide support. So yeah, I mean, I would use Ted Lasso as an example, but I really wanted to expand on my example of Taylor Swift as the King of Cups. How about you, Bonnie? Any thoughts on that, or share your idea of who you've got for a king for us?
For king energy. Yeah, I love your examples, and I loved how you used Taylor Swift. Like that was yeah, that was great. Yeah, I had a few for king. So I'm going to pick the King of Wands,
All right.
and I picked Iron Man. So Tony Stark.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a few reasons. When I think of the King of Wands, he is fiery, he's enthusiastic, he's charismatic. People like love the King of Wands because he's out there, and but he didn't get to where he was by himself,
Mhm.
right? He's not just this like sole person out there leading. He got there because the people are supporting him, and that's very that ties in really nicely with Iron Man. He couldn't be Iron Man without the support of all of those people that are helping him, even helping keeping him alive.
Right.
So he's still a leader, and he's protective of his, kingdom, like of his people. Like he wants to protect them, but people love him. And I just thought that was a really great example of fire energy and um yeah, being bold. And some people are not crazy about the King of Wands because they can be a little bit arrogant. you
Yes.
know, fill
And
in the blank. Iron Man, like hello. So or Tony Stark, I guess, from when he's not Iron Man.
well,
But
and that's funny, right? Yeah, because there's almost the two persona. There's the Iron Man, which everybody loves, and then there's the Tony Stark character, which are the same person kind of, but can rub some people the wrong way, as the King of
right.
Wands could do.
But he does what he wants, and he's not looking for other people, like other people's opinions. He just goes out there and does it with, you know, charisma and like passion. Like that's like such a great example of
Yeah,
passion.
yeah,
So
yeah. Which
yeah,
yeah, which is
that was my pick for the king.
yeah, nice, nice. And then passion, right? That whole idea of wands. So you know me, right? Anytime you pick a superhero, I'm all in. That's we could do an episode on that. Which superhero links to the court card? So that's great, right? I hope our walk through the court cards gave people a couple of things. I'm hoping it gave you food for thought. So in some ways, an interesting way, or at least we hope an interesting way to take a look at the different court cards in the deck. We also hope that it gave you some examples of ways that you can um, attach meaning to the courts, and finally gave you an exercise that you might be able to do by yourself or with friends or with family, or with other tarot practitioners to help deepen the meaning of the court cards. Was there anything else that we didn't cover in our look at the courts, Bonnie, that you wanted to get into?
I don't think so. I mean, I at the end of the day, it would just be, again, try to come at it with this playful energy instead of fearing the court cards. What can that card teach you? What comes up, when you turn over that card and it's a court card, before going into panic mode, be like, okay, well, what am I seeing here? Is this representing me? Do I need this energy? Like really sort of look at all facets of what that card is, and then, it's okay. That's how we learn and explore.
Yeah.
And they can be tricky because they mean a lot of things. So it's all good.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. It's all good. All right.
It's all good. Do we want to pull a card?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm gonna use the rider weight just because I've done some, as people might be able to tell through the changed backdrop, I've done some little remodeling in my office and workspace. So my decks, although they're nearby, the Rider Waite Smith one is pretty much right in front of me. So I'll use that one. How about you?
I'm gonna do late seers. That's funny that we're both going back to our original, the
Back to our
OGs.
OG. All right. Do you want you
Do you
want to
want
go
to pull
first? Oh,
first?
sorry.
I don't know.
All right. I've got sure. I'll
You want to pull?
yeah, sure. I'll pull first. Hang on. Let me just do a good shuffle. I want to make sure that they're well mixed. Get that nice bridge shuffle in. All right. And because
Funny if we pulled a court.
it would be fun if we pulled a court. I would agree. I would agree. All right. Oops. I had a jumper there. I just say the jumper was the 6 of swords, but I'm just going to keep shuffling. All right. Here we stop. What did
Oh,
you
you
say?
pulled a court.
Did you say it was funny if we'd pull a court?
Yeah.
Knight of Wands today.
The Knight of Wands. Oh, I could
Uh,
tell you who my Knight of Wands was.
yeah. Yeah, because because I did the Knight of Wands, right? I actually,
Oh no, I didn't do Knight.
I
Yes,
did the
I
Knight.
did.
No, who would your Knight of Wands have been?
James Bond.
James Bond. Yes, because I did Harry Potter, but I had another one as well. So why James Bond? I
So
know we're going off script, not off
we're going
script.
off
We're, yeah,
script,
we're going
people.
correct. Yeah, we're going
Okay.
rogue. All right.
I picked James Bond because again, he does have that charismatic, fiery energy to him. He's very alluring and he's spontaneous. He just does what he wants and he goes after what he wants. And I think in the same context, he's not looking for a fight, but he will, you know,
Yeah.
he'll fight if he needs to. He's alluring and uh yeah, and he loves to party and right? Like he's like this, I don't know. I just
Yeah.
might be a stretch that James Bond is the Knight of Wands,
No.
but I kind of see that, he's flashy in his nice cars and
Yeah.
he's got that swagger. And I
Yeah.
think about that with the King of Wands, or sorry, the Knight of
The
Wands.
Knight of Wands. Well, because it's funny because I had a second card picked for the Knight of Wands that I didn't share that I had talked to you about when we were prepping. So I'll actually share it now because it's like, and it might have been
Why not?
Knight of Wands because the cards were saying, "Hey, you forgot to share this example," and I didn't share it because I'm not as familiar with it, but. The other example I would have used for the Knight of Wands is the Duke of Hastings from Bridgerton. Now,
Oh,
I'll as I mentioned Bridgerton, there are probably people going, "Oh my goodness, Bridgerton." I'm not far into the series, so I am being encouraged to watch this by Kelly. So my wife is a huge fan, but she knows that I'm a big fan of Downton Abbey. I quite like the historical concept, and she's like, you'll enjoy Bridgerton for the same reason. Now it's not. I think I'm only 3
I think
episodes in,
women and
maybe
men might
4.
have a different appreciation.
I would probably agree, and they might also have a different appreciation for the Duke of Hastings as well. But I'll say, hear me out, because the Duke is strong, and he's fiery, and he's passionate. But I thought of him as an example because he actually doesn't want to be king, at least not in the early stages of where I'm watching, and he's got that charisma. He's nice looking, he's strong, he's young, and he, like you said, like James Bond, he's prone to the same sort of adventurous spirit that James Bond would be, that a knight would be. And he doesn't want to marry, doesn't want to settle down. He kind of likes the idea of that, free flowing air like life that the knight would have. So that's kind of my other example, which leads me to, I notice a lot of movement in this card. Like you can see that the horse itself is flying through the air. And it is a knight that shows actual movement. I'm thinking of other knights because I think all knights are about action. We've talked about this, but I think of other knight cards in the deck, like the Knight of Cups, where the movement is potential movement, that the movement is shown by the wings that actually sit on the knight's helmet. I'm talking about the Rider Waite Smith. And then I think they have wings on their boots as well, on their their armor, boots. But for me, like this is an air card in the knight in the realm of fire. So there's heat, there's drive, there's speed, there's expression, but it's ready for adventure, right? This is a knight in fire. And I'd say it's more than ready if you look. Like they've already actually taken the first step to head out on an adventure. And, I'll go back to the idea that this is not a knight that's confrontational. So this is not a knight that's heading out looking for battle. This is a knight that's heading out looking for adventure. So this is a knight that's not seeking a fight, but is kind of prepared for one if they were to get it. So, what we've drawn the card. So what would you do if you drew this card? So this card could be a call to adventure. It might be asking the question, where do I need to go? What new quest do I need to go on? What new, search do I need to uncover? Or if you think it's pointed at somebody else, it might also be, who's going to support me? Who's going to be the catalyst in moving me forward in this particular area? So, with the Knight of Wands, again, like I said, we went back to a fictional example, but also talked a little bit about the card. How about you? If, what would the Knight of Wands bring up for you that hasn't been talked about either previously in our examples or that I didn't talk about in my draw?
Not really. I mean, everything that you said is exactly what I think about the Knight of Wands. I might just add this idea of spontaneity,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
being spontaneous.
Mhm.
So the Knight of Wands is always up for something. So it's like that friend that you have that's like, "Hey, you want to go to a party? Yeah, let's go." Like they're always willing and ready to go find adventure and do something, but oftentimes really spontaneous. So
Yeah.
that's
Great.
that's all I'd add for the Knight of Wands.
Yeah. Great addition. Yeah, for sure. That definitely. And as you mentioned, that friend or that role that we take on ourselves, it says, hey, you know what? Let's go and do that new thing. Let's do it, but let's do it now.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Your
Exactly.
turn.
You always need a Knight of Wands in your
Yeah, you
corner.
totally do. You totally do. Right?
Okay, so I used the Lightseer's Tarot by Chrisanne, and I drew very different from what we've been talking about today, but I drew the Five of
Oh, wow.
Cups.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So in this card, there's someone sitting kind of, it looks like a beach, and there's some cups that are spilled over, and she's kind of looking at these cups as they're sort of forming like a circle going down and like a spiral almost. What I would say. And there's a path behind her. So it's very, similar to a Rider-Waite-Smith, like the interpretation of that card. So the Five of Cups always reminds me of like crying over spilled milk, although that's kind of a harsh way to look at it, but it can be a really heavy card. It's a card about healing. It can be, it can indicate sorrow. So because it's in that realm of cups, it's about our emotions, relationships, how we're feeling. So, if you're in a situation where you are feeling some sadness or sorrow, it could even be grief. I think what's the important message about this card is to really take your time to deal with those emotions, and that it's okay to, feel them, get support about them. But we don't want to stay there too long, because with the Five of Cups, there's usually three cups that are spilled over. And that's what we're focused
Mhm.
on, the sadness of what we've lost. But behind us, there's still two cups, and they're full of something. So the question could be, what's in those cups? And we can't see that because we're not focused on that. So I think if there is something that you're going through, really honor those emotions, the feelings, whatever it is that you're going through, but know that, fives are about change, and you're not going to stay there. Things will improve, what's the saying? This too shall pass.
Mhm.
And know that there's still something behind you, and figure out what's in those cups that are behind you. And then when you turn around and see those cups, there's another pathway leading off to somewhere else. So I do think it's a time of transition and change, which change can be difficult, but know that you don't have to stay there for long, and that there is something that's still available for you when you're ready, to turn around. And if you've been there for a long time, then that might be a sign that it's okay to to turn around, see what's behind you, and to maybe move on if you're ready for that stage.
Yeah.
What do you think, Peter?
Yeah,
It's a little downer to everything we've been
it's a
talking
little
about.
bit different, but the other the again, the only thing I would add is that concept of containing and support that also sits inside the cups too. So there are times with that idea of the five of cups that it's the recognition. Well, one, there's the idea of permission, and I think the five of
Mhm.
cups gives us permission to be able to sit with the three cups that have been spilled, but
Yes.
it's sometimes also a call to give us permission to look for the support and container that often exists inside the cups, and that might exist inside ourselves, but it
Mhm.
might also require the, as you said, challenge, change that exists inside a five for us to be able to look elsewhere, to look for someone else to provide that container for us, because we're sitting in loss, sorrow, grief, those feelings that exist inside the five of cups. We might not be able to pull ourselves out, to use the visual of the card. We might not be able to turn around and notice the two cups that are still standing, that still have something in them. That would be the only thing. And again, I wouldn't, it's not necessarily an addition, just a revisioning of that card, because it can be it can be a bleak card. It can be a challenging card when we get it in a reading. So
Mhm. And it can also signify healing, right? That we're at that point in our lives that, you know, to honor the healing that we're going through and that, it could be time to now move on, honor that absolutely, because
mhm.
we're just going to keep pulling the five of cups if we're not dealing with those emotions, right? Now is the time to do that and then know that we can move on from there. We don't have to stay there for forever. So
Exactly. Exactly.
okay, Peter. So I think that Peter and I were talking a little bit before, and we would like to open up, like if you have any questions or maybe something specific that you'd like to talk to us, or that you would like us to talk about on our podcast, we would welcome those questions. And we do, you can post them as a comment or you can even email
Mhm.
us. So we have an email address, which we'll put on the show notes, but it is tarot table B and P. So typing out the and, so A-N-D, at gmail.com. So again, that's tarot table B and P at gmail.com. So send us your questions, or if there's something specific you'd like us to talk about, we would definitely welcome that information from you.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Please do. Please do. Let's make it as interactive as possible.
And Peter, where can people find you or what do you have going on?
People can always find me at the, as I keep mentioning, soon to be updated website at peterwhitetarot.com. You can find me on socials. And with that, I'll say Instagram, Facebook, and X from time to time. Also at Peter White Tarot. I've got a bit of a hiatus going on right now, but the one thing I will talk about for those of you that are interested in deepening your learning, that I do offer one-on-one mentoring services. So sometimes that's perfect for a person who is just looking for a sounding board as they're working through various elements of the tarot. If that's of interest to you, then I would state you can do one of two things. You can pop onto my mentoring section on my website, or even just send me a quick email at peter@peterwhitetarot.com. Talk to me about what it is that you're looking to learn. We can even set up a quick getting to know you chat to make sure that you're the right fit for me and I'm the right fit for you, and that and that mentoring pathway that you'd be looking for would be something I'd be able to support. How about you, Bonnie? What kind of things do you have going on? Where can people find you?
Well, before I go there, I was going to say that's a great service that you offer, Peter, because I think a lot of times people they do have specific questions, and when you're in a course setting, sometimes there's not the opportunity to ask a question. But if you offer just a mentoring service, I think that's really great. So people, you should take advantage of.
Well, and I will add, because I right now have, I've got a number of students that I'm mentoring as well, and some it's on a regular basis, and
Mhm.
some it's a one-off. It's a quick email, or even just going to my scheduling app and saying, okay, I need a session on this date, and they come with their questions all set and ready to go. So thank you.
Yeah,
I
I
do
think that's
like it
great.
and wanted to highlight it as a service. So, but yeah, by all means, though, pass. What have you got going on?
But again, sort of on summer break right now.
Yeah.
Things are a little crazy. We're at the beginning of August now as we record this. But yeah, all my services that I offer on my website, breathewithbonnie.com. A little bit on social media, not so much, but you can find me on Instagram at Breathe with Bonnie. So
And if you
yeah.
haven't signed up for the free meditation, then you need to do that. I did a couple of weeks ago. It is fantastic, by the
Oh,
way.
thank
I
you.
didn't get a chance to mention that to you. It is fantastic. So yeah, it has become a regular um, part of my own practice, particularly in the evening as I'm kind of settling.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Peter. I didn't know that. Well, I knew you signed up, but I didn't know you were listening to it. So thank you. Yeah, it's great. You could so it's funny that you do it at nighttime. I practice in the morning before I get out of bed. So I put my headphones on, I have an eye pillow, and before I get out of that's just the easiest time for
For
me.
you.
But it's really great at nighttime
It
because
is.
it does help you to relax. At nighttime, sometimes it's hard to fall asleep because our mind is
Yeah.
going,
Yeah.
a mile a minute, and it just helps get you into that relaxation
Yeah.
response. So I'm
Uh,
glad that you're
It's
listening.
it's
Thanks.
exactly why I use it. It's funny because somebody had described what did they say? They said I'm not because it's not to help me fall asleep, but it's to help me shift from that sort of mindful space. And the comment was, I don't have trouble falling asleep. I'm just really, 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 really good at thinking. And I'm like, so I thought, well, that's kind of interesting because it's a really good way to help quiet the mind and prevent that, what I guess used to be called monkey brain, that idea that, you're just continuously regurgitating and mulling over thoughts. So it is a great tool. I hope people sign up for it. So
Thank you. I appreciate that. And we thank you and we appreciate you for listening or watching. And yeah, we can't wait to connect with you again on the next episode of the Tarot Table. Have a wonderful day.